Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Voltron Legendary Defender Season 2 discussion video. This one, I'm going to discuss episode 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So let me just look up the names of all these episodes, because there's a lot of them here. So I'm going to be discussing Greening the Cube, Eye of the Storm, The Ark of Taugir, Space Mall, The Blade of Marmora, and The Belly of the Weblum. So, yeah, a lot of ground to cover here, because I'm covering, basically the entirety of the middle of the season. Overall, there's definitely some interesting stuff here. But there's also a few points when definitely it doesn't feel like it's as important as it perhaps should be, or they execute something big but maybe not perfectly. Now, I'm saying this having only watched up to episode 9. I haven't seen 10, 11, 12, or 13, so I haven't seen the end of the season. I'm getting this video out at the end of today because I actually really want to watch the episode, so I want to get my thoughts out, because I think it would be impossible to do a video where I cover 10 episodes or something like that, so I'll just cover these ones here. So episode 4, a Pidge-centric episode where they go to a planet that is full of brilliant engineers who seem to have embraced the kind of natural science that is nature to kind of improve their kind of technological kind of skills. And I really liked what this episode did, because it highlighted the fact that Pidge is meant to be the paladin of nature, of the forest, basically. That's kind of what her element to some degree is meant to be. Lance is the kind of water, ice, Keith is the fire, heat. Paige is meant to represent kind of nature, forest to a degree. But she's been very focused on mechanics and stuff like that. Inventing things, being the kind of tech person within the group. So I actually liked the kind of thematic kind of thing that they did within this episode of just addressing that we have this character who doesn't really represent what their kind of nature as a paladin is meant to be at all, and actively kind of talks about how she doesn't like being outside, doesn't necessarily think that much about kind of science and how it's connected to nature, despite all of this stuff that's happening. And even when she shows that she can use the kind of science-nature interface kind of thing that they do there to kind of create the wooden mechs, she can do it, but it's not through her connection to nature. It's because she knows the science of it well and can kind of think about it on that level. I thought that was a really interesting thing to do. And then to kind of have the red line go down in the middle of the big fight against the kind of giant floating cube things that can reflect attacks. And it takes her kind of connecting with her line on a kind of deeper level, kind of, I suppose, understanding the kind of core of what that line is meant to be about, kind of forest, nature, and that side of what it is, and revealing that, so Pidge's line's upgrade is that it fires a beam that basically fires vines, makes plants grow. And they use this pretty interestingly, I thought, just the idea that they fire this into this machine, and because it's not like an energy projectile type thing, the machine can't really fire it back out. Its attempt kind of forces it to just grow, and it's taken down by kind of nature, and we see this species that is taken over by the Galra kind of come back. Very similar to episode 2, in that it's a planet-focused episode with an attempt to add some character. And ultimately it's interesting, but not super important, in the sense that Paige's development in this episode isn't at all important. She connects with her line better, and that's important for the plot. But in terms of who she is as a person and really kind of changing, it's not really all that much there, because it primarily is just a thing to make her more powerful as a paladin going forward. So it's one of those episodes that it was really fun to watch, and I liked the character exploration, and I appreciated the episode, but it definitely wouldn't be my favorite looking back on it. But again, I will say, these are just my initial reactions trying to like record my thoughts throughout the day, basically, of my initial reactions to like all of the episodes. So we'll move on to episode 5, which is called Eye of the Storm, which follows immediately on after this. They use the fact that they were just involved in a pretty heavy battle to kind of as a plot point, that everyone's exhausted because of that, and all of a sudden they're tracked down again. This is like deep in the kind of middle section of the kind of story where we're still addressing the whole idea of Zarkon can find them at any point. They haven't found out what the link is just yet. And they randomly decide that this is the right time to have Karan get infected by the slippery virus, or gets the slips, or whatever they called it. It was interesting in that they basically just said like, oh yeah, like Allurans get this sometimes when they're older, and it's just that their body just starts secreting this sticky fluid all the time, and that was it. They just joked around with that Karan was sliding all over the place, even though he was very important in that he had to fix the internal workings of the castle in terms of how it generates the wormholes, so they could consistently escape from Zarkon. And we go in depth in terms of how that works with the kind of focusing lenses that are made out of a specific material. And I like the setup in that, like, I saw it like immediately. Hunk makes these cakes, these cookies using this mix that turns into like glass type things. I was just like, oh, I see what they're going for. He's basically made focusing crystals, and I thought it would just be the case where like he made them perfectly and they just slot them in, but he actually made really small ones that can work. They just needed to be polished, and they still need to get proper ones eventually. So it wasn't just this kind of crazy thing where Hunk happened. They on the ship they have the ability to make new ones properly. It happened to be that way. So, you know, interesting episode in that, like, obviously there's a big attack happening while they're trying to escape, and it's very action orientated. We have Paige trying to learn Altean so she can kind of understand things a bit more. She makes the connection and kind of helps everything to come together. Lance and Keith kind of get stuck together for part of the episode, and that was fun. Again, one of those episodes that I think is good. I think when I rewatch it and really analyze it in depth, I think I'll get a better appreciation for it. But it's not really what I'm thinking about right now, like given the episodes that have come and are still to come. So episode 6, the Arc of Taugir. This one was interesting again in that they addressed the whole idea of like, okay, Allura thinks Zarkon is tracking her. Keith continues to worry about and think that Zarkon is tracking him because of this Galra connection that he hasn't properly shared with everyone just yet, but is kind of slipping into conversations as we go on. And then Shiro, I think deep down, thinks it probably is to do with him, but isn't really saying it right now. And I like how like Allura and Keith both decide like, okay, we have to know. So they go off on their own and they kind of talk about it. And you have Keith bring up the idea of like to Allura that, you know, not all Galran people are bad. And he's kind of saying this because he doesn't want it to change basically how the group will perceive him, in the sense of like, we've been hating Galra all this time, but now I think I might be at least part Galran. So are they going to hate me? What's going on here? So he kind of feels the need to defend this idea, and ultimately he's correct in that, like, yes, there are Galran rebels, and they're not all bad, but you also understand Allura's point of view in that she was the one who suffered most heavily and one of the most clearly the betrayal of the Galrans and what Zarkon did, and so you can understand why she's just has no like want to trust them, whether that be the character in the first episode, in the third episode, who sacrificed himself and introduced them to the kind of rebel faction, or, you know, I suppose Keith and the way that kind of changes their relationship as we go on through the episodes. Definitely an interesting one to do that, as the rest of our group, so we're obviously down a paladin, down a line, so no Voltron here, deal with what's happening on this planet, which is basically falling apart because they've kind of overmined it. They kind of knew it was going to happen, and it's finally happening, and the Golrans have kind of like abandoned them. They want to escape, but their big ship, their Ark, is out of action, and everyone else is forced to kind of step in and do this. The main gist of this is ultimately that they come together and succeed. Hunk plays an important role because his line gets the upgrade in this episode, revealing like crazy power claws and an extra kind of booster rocket on the top for extra kind of strength and kind of power if needed. So he's always been the like strength, holding up the rest of the group. He can do that even more efficiently now. And the big reveal, what happens here is that they figure out finally that it is in fact the fact that Zarkon is tracking them through his connection to the Black Line, because Keith and Allura get trapped out in space in one of the pods. And what happens is that as they're floating around in space, Keith basically kind of temporarily like meditates a little bit and tries to connect to the line from that far away. And the red line comes to him. And so this idea immediately presents the idea of like, okay, Zarkon obviously has a connection to the Black Line, and that's how he's kind of finding us somehow. So that was an interesting plot point to finally kind of bring together at the end. And then we move into episode 7, Space Mall. When I saw this come up as the title for this episode, I was just kind of like, oh no, filler episode. We're just going to have fun immediately after this big reveal. But I really, really, really like this episode. Not just because we had probably some of the most important stuff we've had in the season so far of Shiro trying to create a deeper bond with the Black Line to kind of somewhat sever the connection to Zarkon. But I actually really liked the stuff in the Space Mall and how Karan thought it would be like the same as it was 10,000 years ago, and is just completely baffled by the fact that it's in 10,000 years, it's developed from basically a kind of pirate trading fair type thing into just being a full-on like Earth-like mall. There were so many little references, meta references, like the fact that our kind of main enemy from this episode is just the main mall cop guy who is obsessed with Zarkon in a kind of he looks up to him as like a hero and has like a poster of Zarkon. I thought that was really, really funny, and how he kind of, you think he's doing all this epic stuff, but it's just really mundane, like I work in a mall type stuff. And yeah, the fun stuff, like you had little plot focus stuff, like Keith going to the knife dealer and showing his Golran blade and kind of getting confirmation it's made out of this special material, and that causing a little bit of an issue as everyone grows suspicious of them. You have Hunk becoming a chef and initially having to pay and work there basically to make amends for eating food, but ends up showing the restaurant owner like the true meaning of like being a chef and like creating good food and stuff like that. Paige is initially kind of very focused, but then sees game consoles and just starts freaking out and is like, we need money to buy that thing, as she and Lance both find an Earth shop, a shop that sells stuff with Earth, and they eventually get all the money together, they buy the games console, and they get a free cow, and they just ride out of there on that. I just thought like there was something like, wow, this episode is just really well written. The mall section ultimately is not particularly important right up until Karan finds basically the one remnant of what it used to be, haggles for the new lenses for the Castle of Lions, and they kind of get out of there. I just thought the rest of it was just really funny and well done. That like it was to the point where like I felt it was to some extent a better written episode than like say like the Paige centric episode, because that episode was good and had like a core basic character arc for Paige, but this one was just like it was funny, it was meta, it had an important side of the episode as well, really important, but there was also stuff going on in terms of all the characters' interests and kind of learning a little bit more about them without kind of going overboard. And then the Shiro section of the episode I thought was really well done. It probably could have used a little bit more time, but I like the basic concept of the Black Line kind of taking over and bringing Shiro to Zarkon's home planet, and it's showing through Shiro through the eyes of the Line, flashbacks of what it experienced. The fact that the lines, at least the black line we get here, but I assume it's all of them, potentially just the black one, I'm not really sure, was made from a comet that crashed on this planet by Alfor, which confirms that in the show we kind of had that vague piece of information that Alfor created the lines, but now we know for sure. Alfor and Zarkon were friends prior to this, and all this sort of stuff. And I just think it came together like really nicely here. The fact that you see Zarkon for a little bit, there's kind of hinting that there's still more to come, obviously, with regards to this connection and how exactly they do that. But the idea that eventually you go into this kind of this plane of existence where like it's like within the black line, kind of like all of their mental kind of connections are kind of like there. And it's basically the mental connection of Zarkon fighting the mental connection of Shiro, and then the black line is present there as well, which is part of the key thing, that Zarkon is more powerful than Shiro. He beats him in the fight. Shiro puts up a decent fight, but Zarkon is much more powerful. But it's what they talk about that ultimately proves who is the right one to be the paladin of the black line, in that Zarkon is all about, I control the black line, I'm the one who's suited to control the black line. And then I like that line from Shiro, no one controls the black line. That fundamentally Zarkon doesn't really realize that the lines are living beings themselves. They are alive just as much as like he is. And he doesn't quite realize that. He just sees it as a weapon, as he says, I think, in that scene. And at that moment, you sort of know what's going to happen, and it does. It plays out perfectly. The black line shows that it's not just a weapon, that it is a living thing, and makes its own mind up, and chooses Shiro over Zarkon's connection, and blasts Zarkon's kind of connection away. It doesn't sever it completely, but dulls it to the point where like Zarkon can't track them anymore by his usual method. Really, really well done. Obviously, there's still, I assume, stuff to come. Obviously, as I said, I haven't seen the last 4 episodes of the season. Hopefully they address that well. Next episode, The Blade of Marmora. So, this is an interesting one that we finally get to go through the base now that the connection's been severed. The episode focuses on Shiro and Keith going to this place. And it's one of those ones where like it's important. It's a really intriguing, really interesting episode, and I will definitely say immediately here, I need to watch this episode again to fully understand everything that was going on here. But I liked what they were doing here, in that like they were saying like you have to kind of like earn that blade, and they kind of put him through this trials of initially thinking that it's just combat, that he has to beat all these people and get through them, and at the end he will unlock knowledge. But there's mysteries throughout the whole thing, in that during the fight with the first person, it eventually gets to a point where, like, you know, you can choose to leave now if you give the knife over to me. And then basically he's left with a choice once he doesn't give up. You know, don't go through that door is what they say. And he walks through the door, and it was like, what's going on here? And he eventually figures it out right at the end, where he doesn't walk through the door. He jams his knife in the kind of holes in the floor and jumps down there. And this is where he experiences the vision. The vision, obviously there's still 4 more episodes I still have to see, but I was a little disappointed with this, because for some reason they didn't commit to it. They had Keith get a vision of his father, and I think this is the first time we've seen Keith's father, and he's a human, and he's holding the knife and kind of reveals that like it's your mother's. She's coming, let her tell you about it and stuff like that. And I don't know, again, I need to rewatch the episode, but I really don't get why they put this kind of, this decision into play. Like, you have to leave now, or you can stay, or something will happen. They sort of established that, like, there was the potential for him to die or hurt himself in this thing, but I fundamentally don't get why there was this urgency from Keith that, like, no, I have to go, they need me. As if, like, him staying for, like, a couple of minutes to learn about his history would have like caused something bad to happen. Again, need to rewatch the episode, but just the initial impression was just like, really, you are not going to show us this big reveal? I assume it's still to come, obviously, but obviously setting up the idea that Keith's mother was Galrin, though we don't know more about it beyond that. So yeah, it was one of those episodes that I expected way more from this episode. It was good. It was still really, really good. I was just kind of frustrated with it. And obviously, it's at this point that's basically it's revealed to the entire group that Keith has this connection and is Gallren to a degree, that he has Gallren blood in his veins because he was able to activate the knife and turn it into a proper sword. So he is part Gallren, and it changes his relationship with Allura because she doesn't really know to think about this. And everyone else is kind of like, okay, it's just an interesting aspect of him. Like they're wondering just as much as we are, like, what's the situation here? How do you not know that this was a part of yourself? And then like Hunk, as we get in the next episode, just jokes that like, okay, well, I'm gonna call him Gallren Keith from now on, and kind of act like he's changing and stuff like that. So, you know, interesting, but I feel they could have done more. And then the final episode I'm going to talk about in this video is going to be episode 9, The Belly of the Weblum. And yeah, this is where they kind of talk about their kind of plan ahead of their kind of final showdown with Zarkon, and we get Keith and Hunk going on a mission to the Weblum to get more lenses, basically, I think, to enact their plan, because they need to make something really big and they need lots of this, so they need to get it kind of from the source, which is this planet-devouring creature, the Weblum, who basically can fire lasers, and in doing so creates the kind of focusing lenses inside of itself. So they go in, and it's one of those episodes. It's very much like episode. It's very much like episode 4, in that it's a kind of one-off episode, kind of focusing on just a couple of our characters. It's a little bit like the arc of Taugear as well, in that it's like obviously character focused. This one is Keith and Hunk, but it's a little bit more, I suppose, interesting in that in there Keith finds a crashed ship, and in there he finds a Gallren person who we don't get a face reveal. The character doesn't talk at all. The character isn't revealed to be fully against them, but in the end leaves after kind of pointing a gun at Keith and taking some of the, you know, the crystals, the lenses with him, the stuff to make the lenses. So very mysterious thing there, but just showing that like Keith again kind of developing in that he's like, okay, even if there were Gallren, I wasn't just gonna like leave them to die in here. Like we're paladins, we're meant to be like peaceful, we're meant to be different than the Gallren, so saving them is kind of an aspect of what we do. And I think there was definitely interesting aspects to it. It was fun to see them kind of use basically the insides of a giant creature as the enemy and like the landscape in the episode. So that was really fun, and it, like, unlike some of the episodes here, maybe like this one is one I like want to rewatch just for like the visuals, just to kind of understand how exactly they were approaching it, and like what part of the animal are they in here, how did they come up with this idea. It was really, really kind of fun what they did here. And then they get out, and like that's kind of where we leave off for now. So yeah, my next video will maybe be tomorrow, maybe Sunday, covering my thoughts on the final 4 episodes of Voltron Season 2. But yeah, for now, that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.